Apologies for that dorky intro. This is the first week where I'll be transitioning into more of a marathon specific block. So I'm just going to explain my training a little bit more. You might have seen in the last video, I flashed my training plan up on the screen. It wasn't up there for a very long time, so you might not have taken much notice. But there are a few ways in which I think my training plan differs from what a lot of other people would typically do. For starters, my longest run's only going to be 32 kilometers, and my longest marathon specific workout is only going to be a half marathon, whereas other people might typically do 5x5k at marathon pace with a 1k float recovery, or even as much as 3x10k at marathon pace. That kind of Canova inspired training, I'm a big fan of it. It's quite different from the way people used to train maybe 15 years ago. I think it's helped to improve marathon times across the board. It's good that it's trickled its way down to the recreational level. However, I do think that some people overdo it a little bit. They try to put the cart before the horse. If you're doing lower mileage, essentially you're not doing the training before the training. The fundamental stuff, which is the mileage to support these really big workouts. For example, if you're doing 100 kilometers a week, maybe less, and you go out and you try and do a 35 kilometer long run with some intensity thrown in, that's a really, really big load spike. The chances are your body is not going to be able to handle that. Maybe you get away with it a couple of times, but the recovery cost, it's probably going to nullify almost all of the benefit you get from the session. And I was guilty of this. I made all of those mistakes in my first marathon, and it didn't go well. I did quite a few marathon specific workouts, and that 5x5k workout was the biggest one. So that was 30k in total, including the floats. I also did 36 kilometer long run at only 30 seconds a kilometer or so slower than goal marathon pace. And my maximum mileage was only about 110 kilometers a week, but that was really only for 1 week. I probably only averaged 90 to 95 for the entire block, and yet I was doing these really, really big long runs and big sessions, and it didn't work. My reasoning was, well, I can't handle doing 100 miles a week, but I'll try and make up for it by being really specific with the sessions that I do. And now that I look back and think about it, it's really idiotic logic. If I couldn't handle high volumes of easy mileage, I don't know why I thought I could handle big volume sessions with intensity thrown in. But anyway, I got to the race and I was both mentally and physically cooked. After that last big 5x5k session, I had a bit of soreness in my Achilles. I was right down in the insertional point in the heel, so that just got worse and worse. Every run I did from that point on as well, my heart rate was sky high, and on the start line, I was mentally out of it. I knew that I wasn't going to run well because I just felt like my fitness had tanked in the 2-week taper, and everything was just really hard and really sluggish during that time. And what happened? Well, I went through the first 5k about 10 seconds a kilometer slower than that 5x5k session that I did, and it felt harder. My heart rate was probably up in the kind of VO2 max territory within about 10k's. I was basically just running on tired legs from that point. Got to 20k, my heart rate was almost at max, pace was slowing, and so I decided just to step off. It was only the second race that I'd ever pulled out of before, and I felt like an absolute failure, as you do whenever you pour so much effort into something and it just goes pear-shaped from the start. But I was able to run a 5k PB a few months later, once I'd recovered from the fatigue a little bit, but that Achilles injury, that wasn't getting any better, and I had to take 2 months off after that 5k. So that whole experience has scarred me. I put my hand on the hot plate and it got burnt, and so I don't want to do it again. So what did I do for the next marathon build? Well, I capped my long run at 32 kilometers, and my longest marathon specific session was a 20k tempo, with the first 10k a little slower than marathon pace and the last 10k at about marathon pace. And I only did about a 5-week block and ran fairly well. Broke 3 hours on my first marathon finish. Was fairly happy with it. It wasn't ideal conditions, and it's a fairly hilly course, and I ended up running about 90 seconds faster in the second half. And anyone who's run Cadbury knows that the second half is much tougher than the first, because you've got to go back up all the hills. And then after that, I backed up and did the Ballarat Marathon 3 months later. Tried to push the training a little bit more, and it just didn't go as well. Everything felt a lot harder. The workouts weren't quite as fast. My heart rate was higher for similar paces. And I was a little bit worried because the last few long runs weren't great. But I went with the pacemakers at 4 minutes a kilometre and hung on and ended up running 2:49, which was the goal, to break 2:50. In that race though, I realised, and a little bit in the Cadbury race before, that my limiting factor is definitely my durability. My quads were absolutely trashed 23 k's in, and I didn't think I was going to make it. I just had to break it down kilometre by kilometre and just say, just hang on to this pace group. And what happened was the quads never really got much worse than what they were at 23 kilometres in. I wasn't able to pick it up in the way that I would like to, but it wasn't my aerobic system that was the limiting factor at all. I felt fine, my breathing was fine. It really just was that muscular endurance. So this time, for this one, I really have to be aware of that, but it's going to be a bit of a balancing act because I don't want to do really big long runs that are going to target that durability, but then also potentially leave me cooked. So my idea is essentially just keep the training load high, never bite off really big chunks. I'm going to do this block where the longest run I'll do is 32 kilometers. I'll do 3 of them at varying intensities, some progressive, others more of a steady pace, maybe getting up to 90 to 95% marathon pace. Then I'll do my specific marathon sessions, capping those at a half marathon distance. But ultimately, the idea is essentially just to try and keep the training load as high as possible without forcing myself into a hole where I'm going to need days to recover. And there's a bit of a strange quirk in my physiology. I'm not sure if other people have the same experience, but if I do a long run and I start out, even if it's just an hour, at an easy pace, if I then try and transition into marathon pace after that, my heart rate just goes sky high. But if I do a 20k at marathon pace where I've just started, done a warm-up, stopped, done some strides, and then do 20k at marathon pace, I can keep my heart rate below threshold for the entire time. Well, that's what I've found in the past anyway. But if I did 12k easy before it, I'd be up above threshold within 2 or 3 kilometers. So I'd get 15 kilometers in the easier way, you would think, and be above threshold. Whereas I can do 20k at a much harder effort and be below. Very, very strange. I don't know why that is. It defies all kind of logic, but that's what happens each time I've tried to do it. That's what ends up happening. So I'm very hesitant to try and do marathon pace sessions at the end of long runs because I know that they're going to be a really, really hard stress. They're not going to be at marathon effort at all. I'm going to be well up into VO2 max really quickly. So I'd prefer to just do long runs at a steady pace, or maybe getting to 90, 95% of marathon pace, because that'll be more like marathon effort. And then save those marathon pace sessions for specific intervals or tempo runs. So the intro might have given the impression that I am dreading this run, but it's not really the case. It's more so I'm just really bad at these kinds of runs. They tend to be my weakness, a progressive long run. I was originally intending to do this as about the third marathon-specific long run of the block, but I decided to continue with NSA for a few more weeks, just to keep that anaerobic threshold as high as possible for as long as possible. And so as a result, the paces I put on the program were probably a little too ambitious for an introductory session, so I decided to pull them back a little bit. I think more appropriate paces are probably to start the first 10k at around 4:40 pace, second 10k at around 4:20 pace, and the last 10k at around 4 minutes a kilometre. And I've probably already taken off a little bit too quickly. First k at 4:25. I'm not sure how accurate that is. I've been trying to slow down quite a bit, but that should correspond with heart rates. I'll probably be trying to keep my heart rate below 135 for the first 10k, below 145 for the second 10k, and below 155 for the last 10k. Again, I don't want to get carried away. I don't want this to be a really heavy stress. I just want to have a nice little taste, an intro into a more marathon specific long run, and to be able to back up again and do a good session on Wednesday. 4:40 for that kilometre, so spot on. Heart rate's a little bit high, just going up a slight incline and going into a bit of a headwind. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to do a 10k loop back around to home. I'll then grab a drink, and on my way through I'll then do 2 out and backs along a flat road from home, 5k out, 5k back, grab a drink again, then go 5k out, 5k back, and then we'll be done. So this first 5k is probably going to be the slowest part of the entire run. A little bit rough underfoot. I'm about to go out onto a road, but I am just going into a slight headwind. So the heart rate currently 132, 4:35 pace for this kilometre so far, which is pretty good. I am feeling really good today, which is surprising. It's amazing how when you kind of amp yourself up for a bigger session, your body just kind of switches on. The last few long runs that I've done, even though they've just been at an easy pace, I've not felt that great. I felt quite tired, but today I'm feeling pretty good. Maybe it's why people tend to run at a slightly faster pace, because they get more endorphins, they feel smoother, and so they fall into that trap of pushing a little bit harder because maybe it does just feel a little bit better, but in terms of the fatigue of your body, going faster is still more fatiguing. So that was a 4:30 kilometre, so I can probably afford to just back it off a little bit. In terms of fueling, I've got 4 gels, as I showed earlier. I'm going to take one every 6 kilometres. It might be a little bit of overkill for a run like this, because I'm not really running a really high intensity in the first couple, and I'm probably only getting into a moderate effort in the last 10, though it'll probably feel harder than that because it is a long run. But I really just want to try and train my gut, try and practice running with lots of carbs in the system. So I've got a bit of a tailwind now, and for the most part it's slightly downhill all the way back to my house. So what I'm going to do is I'll dump the camera when I pick up my first bottle, and I'll just have to explain the rest of the session. I really don't want to have to wear the camera for the whole time, especially when we're going at a faster pace. So just about to take the first gel, and in terms of that salt capsule, I'll take that at about 19 kilometers just before I pick up my second bottle. So that's more just as a practice as well. It's not particularly warm today. The sun's out, which is warm on the skin, but the air temperature's pretty low. Heart rate's at 129, pace 4:35 at the moment. So first gel. So that was a 4:34 kilometre. Still feeling pretty good, which I guess I should be, because I'm only 6 kilometres into a 30k run and it hasn't been a particularly fast pace. Someone's burning off down here. I have to try and cover my face with my t-shirt. It's really irritating. I think the wind's blowing it in the other direction, so that's alright. Or not. It's blowing it in my direction. So the t-shirt is going to come over the face. And I'll have to tuck the bottom of it in. Oh, I can still smell it. But we got past the worst of it. So, oh Jesus, gone a bit too quick. It's the problem with these runs when you do get yourself amped up for them. You get in a bit of a rhythm and it just feels good, and you try and back off and you don't seem to. Heart rate's still good though, 134 BPM. Current pace 430. That's alright. Could back off just a little bit more. But I have been going downhill for quite a while, so it's only slight. Maybe it's a 1% grade, probably not even that. And I'm about to just go up just a little bit here. So I probably could have sorted out a few more hills for this one, but I think I need just a nice little introduction, get a bit of confidence with the longer, slightly more intense long runs. But I will be trying to get on a few more hills during the marathon block for these longer runs, because I think it's going to be really important just for preparing my quads. The back end of Melbourne, it's not really hilly, but there are a few little hills. I've heard people say that they can bring you unstuck a little bit if you're not feeling particularly good at that spot. Can lose quite a bit of time, but for the most part I would still consider Melbourne a quite flat marathon. Heart rate check 132 BPM, pace 437. Hey, how's it going? So I think my 70% max heart rate is 129 BPM, so I'm sitting just a bit above that here. I'd call this, it's kind of the bottom to middle of steady for me. Definitely not an easy pace. If I ran this for my easy runs, I think I'd be cooked pretty quickly. So I tend to go a bit slower, but it does feel pretty comfortable and you feel quite smooth. So current pace 431, heart rate 133 BPM. So I'm sitting right where I need to be in terms of heart rate. Pace is a little bit quick, so I could just back off a little bit more, and I'll try to do that, but it is hard when you've got a bit of a tailwind and you're going slightly downhill. The easier I go now, the faster I'll be able to go in the last 10k at the right intensity. I really don't want to go above 155 BPM, so that'll be the limiting factor. If the pace is coming really easily and my heart rate's below 155 BPM, maybe I'll roll 350s in the last 10k, but we'll see how it plays out. Always the annoying part of my runs here, this intersection. It's fairly busy and cars tend to just chop you straight off. They don't care at all about pedestrians for the most part. So I'm probably going to stop for about 30 seconds at this first stop. At the second stop, I'll just run straight through. I'll grab my bottle off a wall. I might even change into a singlet. Hey, how's it going? 4:34 for that kilometre. And this is where I'll leave you. I'll go through the rest of the session when I get home. But happy hobby jogging. This video is getting pretty long, so we'll just say the run went really well. I averaged 4:33 a kilometre for the first 10k, 4:16 a kilometre for the second 10k, and 3:58 a kilometre for the last 10k. And I was able to keep my heart rate below all of the limits that I gave myself. So my fears of my endurance not being up to snuff were somewhat lessened, and we're 7 weeks out from Melbourne and everything's tracking really well. So if you'd like to look at the workout in more detail, you can have a look at my Strava from August 24. And if you'd like to follow along, feel free to subscribe below. And remember, you can never take your hobby jogging too seriously.